another plan that might even offer more savings or be easier to navigate in the new year. So this is really just one of the tools in the toolbox that someone can use.
It's that time of year again, Medicare open enrollment. And this is something you don't want to ignore. The choices you make right now can save you thousands of dollars next year or cost you thousands of dollars. For the next 5 episodes on Decoding Retirement, we'll dive into one key topic each day that will make Medicare open enrollment a whole lot easier to navigate. Today, we start with one of the most important documents you'll ever get in the mail, the Annual Notice of Change, or ANOC. And joining me to help us better understand what the ANOC is and provide a checklist for you to follow is Fred Riccardi, president of Medicare Rights Center. Fred, welcome.
Thank you, Bob. I'm delighted to be here.
A pleasure to have you here. It will be a pleasure to have you walk us through what folks need to know about the ANOC. And so let's start here. What exactly is it? Who gets these notices? And why should they even care about Medicare beneficiaries, even care about this piece of mail?
Well, Bob, the ANOC, also known as the Annual Notice of Change, is a notice that people who are enrolled into Medicare get every time this time of year by September 30th that describes some potential changes. Now, just to step back for a moment, we are close to entering what we call fall open enrollment for Medicare. This is the time of year that people can review their Medicare coverage and make very important changes. And what I love about this time of year is I find it energizing, and I also find it sometimes very exhausting because there's a lot of information to review. So we train counselors throughout the country on this, and we help beneficiaries through our helpline at the Medicare Rights Center. So I'm just thrilled to be able to talk about this and try to just demystify some of it.
Yeah, I can tell you that I'm the chair of our local senior center, and I interviewed some of our seniors about the ANOC in advance of our talk today, and many of them don't even look at it, Fred, which is kind of surprising. One of the women was 93 years old and said, I think I know what I'm doing, but I thought, well, there's always lots of changes that you should be aware of. And it made me think that ignoring the ANOC can lead to some profound negative consequences. Is that fair to say?
It is. And I think, quick takeaway is someone should read their ANOC, because if they don't read their ANOC, they're going to potentially miss some important information.
What's the smartest way to review it?
Okay. What I like to do is take a step back and think about what is most important to someone. What are the questions that I'm seeking to answer, and might that information be included in the annual notice of change? How much is it going to cost to stay enrolled into a plan? If I'm enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan, now a Medicare Advantage plan is a private plan that offers someone all of their Medicare benefits and sometimes some additional benefits. But a key question is, will my provider still be in the plan's network next year? And if I'm receiving Part D drug coverage, whether that's through a Medicare Advantage plan or a Part D plan, how might that drug coverage change next year? These are extremely important questions, and a lot of information about those changes will be included in the annual notice of change, and we can dig a little bit deeper into that too.
Yeah, I want to dig into all of that on a much deeper level. But first, I want to just say, if someone didn't receive their ANOC, or maybe they put it in the shredder by accident, what should they do? I believe there's a way to read these documents online from their provider. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a few things that someone can do. Well, first, they can call the plan and request to receive one in print in the mail. They may have even opted in for an electronic annual notice of change and may have missed it, because we all know we get dozens of emails every day. Someone can also go online and search for their annual notice of change. But something I've noticed that's a little different this year than in previous years is sometimes people have to log into their plan's online account to get that annual notice of change. So it might vary plan by plan. So someone might have might have to log in to get the next year's annual notice of change.
I understand that premiums are rising and it's quite a sticker shock for many people. So is that the best place to start, is to look at your monthly premiums and how they're changing?
Well, that tends to be the simplest place to start, but it's not the place to stop. And the reason for that is twofold. First, the cost of the premiums may vary year to year, and there may be some regional differences. So we may hear, well, the average premium for a Part D plan next year is $37. But if you're living in a certain region, it may be more, it may be less. And there's also in some years, there's quite a bit of volatility. Someone may enroll in a plan that is, zero premium or close to zero premium, and then all of a sudden it really jumps up. And so that variation has happened over many years. But there are some unique things happening in 2026 where someone may or may not see some sticker shock. So, for example, we did see a sharp decrease in the cost of prescription drugs as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act last year, but we saw an increase in some of the drug plan premiums. Now, previously, Medicare had tried to stabilize those premiums, and the current administration is also trying to stabilize those Part D premiums, but someone may still see a change in their premium this year. So that's why it's really important to find out what's changing, how it's changing, but not to just stop there.
Right. I think for some people, it's worth creating like a spreadsheet or a table where it says, here's my premium for 2025, and here's what the projected premium will be for 2026. But as you said, don't stop there. We also need to look at annual deductibles, for instance. Is that correct?
Yeah, and what's helpful is the ANOC, or the annual notice of change, does do that for someone. So there is a graph, and you can see in 2025, you, the Medicare beneficiary, were paying this, and in 2026, you will be paying that. But like you said, you don't stop there. You look, there's going to be a change in the deductible. If there is a deductible, there's going to be changes potentially in co-payments or co-insurance. That's something that we've seen. Is the co-insurance, just for your audience as a reminder, that's the percentage of the cost of a drug or a health service that you're responsible for paying. So it may be a 20% co-insurance on a prescription drug, and those changes will be listed out in the annual notice of change.
Right. And then as you're looking at co-payments and co-insurance trends, at least what I'm hearing anecdotally is, again, sticker shock that co-insurance might be going from 10% to 20 to 30%. And obviously people will be have to think about like how that affects their household budget, right?
Well, there may be some changes in premiums, and there may be some changes in the percentage of the cost that someone is paying for a drug, but I'm still very excited and enthusiastic about the number of people that are going to benefit in Medicare from the out-of-pocket cap that is now part of prescription drug coverage. Last year was the first year during follow-up and enrollment that we were speaking with previous clients that we were helping with drug plan selection, taking multiple drugs, expensive drugs. And these individuals were going from paying $12,000 a year in co-insurance for expensive drugs to then benefiting from a $2,000 out-of-pocket cap. So that is the silver lining, is that people who are taking very expensive drugs, taking multiple drugs, they'll still benefit from the maximum out-of-pocket cap. But that doesn't mean that people should not review their coverage, because what's also included in the annual notice of change, importantly, is whether there is a change to someone's drug formulary. Now, the drug formulary is a list of what drugs the plan will be covering next year. And I'll tell you one thing, one guarantee: formularies change every single year.
Yeah. Fred, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about formularies and tiers and provider networks, and also the maximum out-of-pocket changes there. So don't go away. Welcome back to Decoding Retirement. I'm speaking with Fred Riccardi. He's the president of the Medicare Rights Center. Fred, before we took our break, I promised that we would talk more about other things. And one of the things on the annual notice of change that people will have to evaluate will be the maximum out-of-pocket costs. These costs, as my understanding, that at least with Medicare Advantage plans, has escalated dramatically over the years, and I suspect the same will be true for 2026. What do folks need to do in terms of looking at the MOOPs, as sometimes they're called?
So the maximum out of pocket in Medicare Advantage is the amount that someone would have to pay if they incurred a number of services or costs within the plan, and then after that they would no longer be on the hook for medically necessary approved coverage. Unfortunately, we don't have an out of pocket maximum in original Medicare. But that's important to know because some Medicare Advantage plans may have different out of pocket caps, but that's an important thing for someone to look at. And then also, there's something that's called the evidence of coverage. Now, I want to just make a distinction between the annual notice of change and the evidence of coverage. The evidence of coverage is a much more detailed document that explains the summary of benefits, the details around coverage of certain benefits, also someone's legal rights to appeal coverage. And there's a lot of good information in it, but it's a dense document. And if someone wants to get a hold of their evidence of coverage, they may receive that every year by September 30th. They may call the plan to receive one too. But what's helpful about the evidence of coverage is people can look and say, okay, if I was, to unfortunately get sick this upcoming year, what would my coinsurance be for, say, chemotherapy or some type of diagnostic service? So someone may not be receiving those services. And so it would not show up in their annual notice of change. So they can go to their evidence of coverage to dig in a little bit deeper. But back to Medicare Advantage and the annual notice of change. I would say the most important thing for someone to look out for if you're enrolled in Medicare Advantage is to try to determine whether your provider network, the providers that you are seeing, are going to be in network next year. And the annual notice of change should be able to tell you that.
Right. And then you mentioned prescription drugs a second ago, and obviously, again, lots of confusion around the formularies and the tiers and the drugs moving off formulary or into a different tier. How might someone check what's happening with their prescription drugs, whether their go-to pharmacy is still in the preferred and in-network, et cetera? That's all in the ANOC as well?
Yeah. And so what will be found in the ANOC, whether someone is just enrolled in a standalone Part D plan, so maybe they have original Medicare, a supplement, a Medigap, and they also have a Part D plan, those changes to prescription drug coverage would be included in the ANOC, or whether someone's enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan and they've received their Part D drug coverage through the Medicare Advantage plan, those changes. And so beyond the formulary changes, if someone is taking a specific medication, there's essentially a dizzying array of information to digest when trying to understand some of the changes to the formulary and that coverage. And someone does not solely have to rely on the annual notice of change. They can go onto Medicare's plan finder. Medicare.gov has a plan finder. You'll hear more about that in the coming days. And someone can look at other drugs that maybe they think they're going to be prescribed in the new year. So you can't solely rely on the annual notice of change. Sometimes you're going to need the plan finder, Medicare.gov, and then sometimes you're going to have to need a little bit of help with that too.
Right. So two things about prescription drugs. One is we know that there's a $2,000 cap on covered drugs. Some of the drugs that you are on may no longer be covered. May have moved off formulary or into a different tier. And then secondly, we know that the previous administration had negotiated some caps on the top 10 drugs out there. What do folks need? Will folks be able to find that in their ANOC as well, or do they have to go searching elsewhere for how those two things affect them?
Well, if someone is taking one of the now I think roughly 20 drugs that have been negotiated, they may see that the cost of that drug change. Now, in combination with other drugs that they're taking, if they're already reaching that out-of-pocket cap of the $2,000, they may not necessarily know, oh, how much this one costs and how much that costs. They would in the beginning, like when they go to the pharmacy, depending on the cost of the drug, they may reach that cap the first month. In January, they may be paying out of $2,000 out of pocket. But they will see more drugs that are being negotiated, and those prices will be lower. Now, the out-of-pocket cap is the real protection. They're protected from that.
What do you think of the red flags in an ANOC that would mean that it's time to change plans?
Well, I think a big red flag is changes in provider networks if you're enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan. I think another red flag, if there's a drug that was on formulary and is now off formulary, that means that if you stick with that plan, you're going to have to appeal to the plan to cover the drug that you were previously taking. So that's another red flag. And as I had mentioned earlier, just don't stop by only looking at the annual notice of change. I think there may be another plan that might even offer more savings or be easier to navigate in the new year. So this is really just one of the tools in the toolbox that someone can use. But those kind of come top to mind. People tend to focus on the premium, but if you look a little deeper, the formularies, the provider networks, those tend to be what we hear most often from folks as concerning.
Yeah, and I mean, this can be overwhelming, Fred. Right? I get my ANOC. There's a grid that shows me my current plan, my 2026 plan. I go into the Medicare Plan Compare tool, and there might be 40 Medicare Advantage plans that I have to sift through. This is not an insignificant amount of work. So for people who are overwhelmed by all this, I guess two things. One is, what's the one thing that they should not skip doing, and where can they go to get help?
Yeah. And so there is help available. So that's the good news. In every state, there's something called the SHIP, which is the State Health Insurance Program. And these are counselors that provide independent and unbiased counseling to people to help them understand their Medicare options, to enroll in Medicare, and to review their coverage every year during fall enrollment. They also provide some additional valuable services. They help enroll people into programs that lower the cost of their prescription drugs, pay their Medicare premiums, etc. People can also call 1-800-Medicare. The representatives at 1-800-Medicare can also answer questions about drug plans and Medicare Advantage plans and those changes. And then there's also the online tool. And so 1-800-Medicare or a SHIP counselor can help someone use that tool too to explore the options and the differences year to year.
Right. And then in terms of what folks can do at the Medicare Rights Center, is there information there that they can also avail themselves of?
Yes. And so we have a national helpline. It's 1-800-333-4114. And on our helpline, what we do is we answer questions to people who are new to Medicare, have been enrolled into the program. We receive phone calls from family members and caregivers and other loved ones and professionals that are helping Medicare beneficiaries. And we help people understand when to enroll into Medicare, how to enroll into Medicare, and what to consider when making these important decisions in the beginning, because we want people making the best choices for themselves today, but also to think about the future, because none of us want to think about, oh, someday I may need this prescription drug or I may need this service. And most importantly, we help people understand their rights within Medicare and the system, because if someone encounters a problem, And we all inevitably encounter some problem in the healthcare system. We want people to know their rights, and then we also want them to ask for help and to get that information from trustworthy sources.
Yeah. When I think about getting help, I also think that we're trying to help people who are Medicare beneficiaries, but we also need to help adult children, the children of these Medicare beneficiaries who might be helping their parents try to sift through what the right coverage is. And it's equally important for adult children who might be listening to be in a position to get the information they need to help their parents.
Well, absolutely. So we need to help our parents understand their Medicare options, how to best maximize their coverage, and to make sure that they avoid any pitfalls within the system. But also, we're preparing ourselves because the Medicare program is for the current generation of beneficiaries, and we also have to make sure that it's there for the next generation. And so it offers the current group of beneficiaries health and economic security. We need to keep it strong so it's there for the rest of us too.
Fred, we've run out of time, so I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom about the annual notice of change. It's been really helpful to our viewers and listeners, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So that wraps up this episode of Decoding Retirement. We hope we provided you with some actionable advice to help you better plan for and live in retirement and prepare for Medicare's open enrollment period. And don't remember, tomorrow we'll look into whether or not you should keep or switch your plan with Marsha Mantell.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.